when the historic ice storm that hit Texas in January 2024 collapsed the power grid. Dr. Kathleen Anderson and her team working in the ICU at Dallas Memorial Hospital thought it was just a temporary power outage. But when temperatures dropped to minus 15 degrees Celsius and hospital generators began failing one by one, life support machines for 47 ICU patients began falling silent. "We're losing everyone," head nurse Linda desperately shouted into her radio, her breath steaming in the freezing cold. But Kathleen was already moving among patients with manual ventilation techniques, because this type of equipment failure wasn't foreign to her at all. And in the next 72 hours spent in the frozen hospital, all of Texas would learn who Kathleen Anderson really was. Because some people wear doctor uniforms, but actually have battlefield medicine experience. Welcome to Hidden Legends. Before diving into this incredible Cold War story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the like button to help us reach more viewers. Dr. Kathleen Anderson was a 35-year-old experienced ICU specialist who had been working at Dallas Memorial Hospital for 8 years. Her long blonde hair was always in a professional bun, her blue eyes both compassionate and determined. She specialized in critical patient care, working with heart failure, respiratory problems, and trauma cases. "Dr. Anderson is the heart of our ICU," said head nurse Linda Martinez. "When working with her, we know even the most critical situations will be handled professionally." But Kathleen's composure and crisis management skills came from very different places than a typical ICU doctor's experience. Her colleagues found her response to emergencies remarkable. "Dr. Anderson, how do you stay so organized during the highest stress situations?" they would ask. "Experience," Kathleen would say quietly. "Every situation requires systematic assessment and precise application." This experience came from a 10-year Army combat medic career, field medicine in Afghanistan and Iraq, emergency response to wounded soldiers, life-saving operations in combat zones. Kathleen had performed medical interventions without electricity in the world's most challenging places. Kathleen Anderson's real story began 17 years ago. She joined the Army at 18. Growing up in a small Texas town, Kathleen had been interested in both medical field and service since childhood: emergency medicine, trauma response, protecting people. "I want to succeed in both medical and protection fields," she had told the Army recruitment specialist. After basic training, she attended combat medic school, then advanced battlefield medical support training. She showed exceptional performance. She caught the attention of Special Forces medical support. Being a combat medic in the battlefield was the most challenging medical training. Field medicine, wounded soldier care, medical intervention without electricity, surgery under fire. Kathleen learned to save lives in the most difficult conditions. During her 10 years of active duty, Kathleen served in various war deployments, medical operations at forward operating bases in Afghanistan, in Iraq, Special Forces support, field medical aid, combat zone healthcare services. Kathleen's expertise was maximum life-saving with limited resources. Her most critical assignments were frontline medical operations, wounded soldier care, treatment without electricity, manual life-saving interventions. She completed 89 confirmed successful medical operations. Kathleen's Army training was a special combination: battlefield medicine, intervention without electricity, manual life support systems. Combat medic training covered techniques not taught in civilian hospitals. "A combat medic must be a complete medical warrior," said training instructor Sergeant Rodriguez. In the battlefield, medic, protector, lifesaver, integration of medical care with survival. Kathleen learned this philosophy by living it. Surgery in bombed hospitals, manual ventilation during power outages, patient care in freezing cold. She developed alternative solutions for every situation. The most critical training was medical intervention simulations without electricity. Precise medical care in dark environments, manual life support, monitoring without batteries. Kathleen learned to perform field medical assessments even in civilian hospital environments. During an operation in Helmand, she treated 12 wounded soldiers simultaneously at an outpost without electricity. Kathleen used her field medical expertise to successfully treat 7 critical medical cases. After that mission, she became one of the Army's most valuable battlefield medical specialists. She received special training in medical intervention under extreme weather conditions, freezing cold, extreme heat, precise medical care in environments without electricity. This training would be very useful during the Texas ice storm. After 10 years of active duty, Kathleen decided to transition careers. War deployment fatigue, desire for normal life, commitment to civilian medical service, ICU specialization was a natural career progression. Kathleen was particularly interested in critical patient care. Life support, emergency intervention, technology-supported care, but also care without technology. ICU specialization was a perfect fit. In medical school, Kathleen was overqualified. Battlefield medical training, trauma assessment, experience with intervention without electricity. Her Army medical background provided an excellent foundation. "I've always wanted to work in critical patient care," Kathleen had said, "to provide medical help to patients in both technology-supported and manual environments." ICU specialization was a perfect fit. The critical medical emergency environment felt familiar to Kathleen. Quick decisions, life or death situations, precise timing. But civilian, technology-supported, peaceful. When Dallas Memorial Hospital hired her, Kathleen was an exceptional ICU specialist. Critical patient care excellence, composure during emergencies, manual intervention expertise. But no one knew about her extraordinary battlefield medical background. On Monday, January 15, 2024, Kathleen was performing her normal ICU doctor duties, critical patient care, life support monitoring, medication management, routine medical care, normal ICU doctor work. At 9:30 a.m., Kathleen was monitoring a heart failure patient in the ICU. A 71-year-old critical patient, successful treatment, stable health condition. "Dr. Anderson, patient 12's progress is good today," said her colleague Dr. Johnson in a professional tone. "Good to hear. Critical patients deserve quality care," Kathleen said with professional warmth. But Kathleen was monitoring unusual developments in weather reports. Arctic blast approaching Texas, power infrastructure warnings, hospital security protocols. Warnings from the Weather Service were concerning. Historic cold wave approaching. Power infrastructure at risk. Hospitals should prepare. At 6:45 p.m., the hospital power system activated. All units, Arctic blast hitting power grid, backup generators online, critical systems protected. Immediate response began in the hospital. Emergency protocols, power backup procedures, transition from routine cold weather precautions to crisis intervention. "Dr. Anderson, the power grid is collapsing. Generators are online, but the situation is critical," said head nurse Linda. Kathleen nodded but was worried internally. Her years in the Army had taught her how unreliable generators could be, especially in this type of extreme weather. The next announcement over the hospital speaker confirmed her fears. "Main grid completely down. Temperature dropping to -15 degrees Celsius, critical patients at risk, generator fuel limited." Kathleen looked out the window. Texas's electrical systems weren't prepared for such cold, and generator fuel capacity would last at most 48 to 72 hours. Then what? When Kathleen looked at the flickering light of ICU monitors, she understood how serious the situation was. Other doctors and nurses were applying routine procedures, but Kathleen was seeing different things. The generators consuming fuel at this rate wasn't normal. The extreme cold was forcing them, making them consume more energy. When fuel ran out, all life support machines would shut down. There were 47 critical patients, and all were dependent on these machines, Kathleen calculated to herself. At this consumption rate, fuel would last at most 2 more days, maybe less, and outside, the storm was still continuing. Something changed inside her at that moment. She was no longer just an ICU doctor. That alarm she had learned over years in battlefields began ringing in her mind. Survival mode. As Kathleen left the ICU, she encountered technical staff member Mike Torres in the hospital corridor, a middle-aged, experienced electrical technician. "Dr. Anderson, please stay in the ICU. The electrical situation is very dangerous," Mike said anxiously. "I'm an ICU doctor. There are critical patients inside. Manual intervention may be needed," Kathleen said. "The situation is very dangerous. Generators will run out of fuel. All systems may shut down. The technical team is looking for solutions." Kathleen's eyes spotted the emergency flashlight on Mike's equipment belt. Then, she visualized the hospital layout in her mind. "Mike, critical patients may need manual intervention. I need to reach them," Kathleen said quietly but determinedly. "What?" "Dr. Anderson, you're an ICU doctor." "I'm also a former Army combat medic," Kathleen said in a calm but determined voice. "I served in Afghanistan and Iraq. I learned to treat patients without electricity, to perform surgery in freezing cold. There are critical patients inside. I can help them." Mike was surprised. He had never thought this calm, professional doctor had a military background. "Dr. Anderson, if you really have such experience, someone who can handle this situation needs to reach the patients." At 9:30 p.m., generators began shutting down one by one. Fuel was running out. Backup systems were collapsing. There were 47 critical patients in the ICU, and life support machines were falling silent. Kathleen entered the ICU. In one hand, her manual medical bag, in the other, an emergency flashlight. The corridors were completely dark. All electrical systems had collapsed. Emergency lights had also gone out. Temperature was dropping rapidly. Kathleen visualized the hospital layout in her mind. There were 47 critical patients in the ICU. Life support machines weren't working. Manual intervention was needed. Temperature -15 degrees Celsius, hypothermia risk. Army combat medic training kicked in, both medical and survival awareness. When she reached the ICU, most patients' life support machines had shut down. Patient 7, heart monitor not working. Patient 12, breathing machine stopped. Patient 23, hypothermia symptoms. Kathleen took position, calculated movement from battlefield training, manual intervention, patient protection priority. First patient, manual CPR began. Battlefield medicine technique, life-saving without electricity. Second patient, manual ventilation, technique from Army training, respiratory support without electricity. Third patient, hypothermia control, body temperature protection, manual warming techniques. For 72 hours, Kathleen manually kept 47 patients alive in the frozen ICU. "Stay calm, I'm helping you. Everything is under control," Kathleen said, moving among patients. On the second day, the hospital had completely frozen over, windows covered with ice, corridors like ice rinks. But Kathleen had established a temperature protection system in the ICU. She wrapped her patients in blankets, applied body temperature protection techniques, performed manual temperature monitoring, extreme weather protocols from combat medic training. "Dr. Anderson, how are you doing this?" asked Nurse Linda, shivering in the freezing cold. "I learned it in the Army," Kathleen said briefly, while manually checking a critical patient's pulse. Patient care in extreme conditions. On the third day, fuel had completely run out. The hospital was completely without power. But Kathleen was still keeping all 47 patients alive. Manual ventilation, manual CPR, manual medication calculation, manual vital monitoring. The complete repertoire of a combat medic's life-saving in extreme conditions. When power returned at the end of the third day, hospital staff found Kathleen providing manual intervention to 47 patients simultaneously. All patients were stable, vital functions normal, all under Kathleen's manual care. "Incredible," said Hospital Director Dr. Williams. "Are you a doctor or a medical specialist?" Kathleen hesitated. Decision moment. Former Army combat medic, Special Forces medical support, more than 89 successful medical operations in battlefield conditions. And in civilian life, ICU specialist, Kathleen said quietly. Complete silence from hospital staff. The community's beloved ICU doctor was actually an elite Army medical specialist. "Army combat medic? You were a medical specialist in the battlefield?" asked Dr. Johnson in amazement. 10 years active duty, battlefield medicine, medical support without electricity, patient care in extreme conditions. Emergency response teams were grateful for expert manual intervention. Doctor, professional manual coordination saved multiple patients' lives. Protected patients learned about Kathleen's heroism. Patient 7, Mr. Wilson, was very emotional. Dr. Anderson, I didn't know you were in the Army, but I always felt you were very strong. Mr. Wilson, I'm still the same person, still your doctor, still here for you. Patient families expressed their gratitude. Dr. Anderson's protection saved our loved ones' lives. Now we know why. Kathleen continued her normal ICU doctor duties, but colleagues saw her differently. Respect mixed with admiration. How do you transition from Army to ICU doctor? Asked young Dr. Jessica. Both jobs are about protecting lives, different environments, same mission. Kathleen's story isn't just about manual heroism. It's about the evolution of protective service spirit, the application of Army combat medical skills to ICU doctoring. From Army to ICU doctoring, from battlefield medical operations to patient care, from manual missions to compassionate medical treatment, always protective service. So I ask you, do you know Army combat medic veterans who serve quietly in your hospital community? Those with hidden battlefield medical backgrounds who contribute silently in hospital environments. Share your experiences in the comments. Because at Hidden Legends, we believe the greatest protectors often serve at the most critical moments. If this story moved you, share it, subscribe, and help these important veteran medical stories continue. See you in the next legend. And remember, next time you see an ICU doctor, nurse, or hospital worker, you might encounter healthcare workers with Army combat medic backgrounds. Real heroes transform their forms of service, but protective sensitivity is eternal.